In this video, we'll be going over the reimbursement checklist. We'll go over the documentation needed to successfully submit your reimbursement. So what is the checklist and how do we use it? The checklist helps us organize your packet. This expedites the review process on our end. We often use it to cross-reference with the backup documentation you submitted. You can find this checklist in your expense and match workbook. There's 15 items on the checklist. I'll be going over each one and I'll briefly describe what we're looking for when you submit this documentation. The first document we check is your FSR, your financial status report. This report is in the expense and match workbook. It shows your recorded match and expense amounts after you enter them in the match and expense report. It must be signed every month. Next, we have the general ledger. All expenses should be reflected on the general ledger and it should be separated by grant. So we would like to see that what you're charging to AmeriCorps and what you're charging to other grants. Next, we have the staff summary. Staff summary is required every month. This worksheet summarizes staff members' hours and monthly salary. I go over the staff summary and how to fill it out in another video, so check that out if you would like to learn more. Next item is fringe benefits. Please make sure to describe your fringe benefits in the personnel section in the budget and when you submit your expense and match report. Consult your organization's fringe benefit policy to get that calculation. If you have any questions about your program, any program-specific fringe question, please reach out to your financial manager. Next up, we have staff travel. When you submit staff travel documentation, please make sure that it's reasonable, allowable, and allocated. Always consult your organization's travel policy and make sure you submit clear documentation and receipts. If you have member costs, make sure you submit only allowable costs like transportation and provide detailed invoices and log sheets. The methodology on how you determine costs should be detailed in your cost allocation plan. Next, we have supplies. If you purchase supplies, please make sure they're reasonable, allowable, and allocable. And remember that all purchases made under AmeriCorps must bear the AmeriCorps logo. Equipment purchases with a unit value of $5,000 or more are not allowed under AmeriCorps. If you have any questions about a purchase, please reach out to your FM and we can work with you to determine your best options. If you have consultants or contractors, please submit your contractor form in Dropbox and all invoices. Invoices must include scope of work, dates of service, rate paid, and if it totals more than $25,000, we require a copy of the contract or any documentation of it having been competitively bid. Next, we have staff and member training. If you have staff or member trainings, please submit a copy of the invoice, receipt, or other proof of cost showing the name and dates of the training, the name of the individual's training, and the cost. Also include a copy of the agenda. If any of the attendees are not in the grant budget submitted, please submit a written justification as to why this cost is relevant and an appropriate charge to the grant. Travel costs associated with this training should be reported as travel in the travel line item. Advertising is generally not allowable, but in some cases it may be allowable if it's directly related to the purpose of the grant. Check with us prior to incurring the expense if you want to charge it. You would have to submit a bill or receipt and the explanation of the purpose of the advertisement. And in some cases, we might ask for a copy of the actual ad. Next up, we have background checks and communication costs. If you're billing for background checks, please submit a receipt detailing the types of background checks performed and the cost, along with a list of the individuals checked. If the testing organization's policy is to not issue receipts, then you must submit a statement to that effect along with proof of payment. If you're submitting communication costs such as telephone or internet, we would like to see a detailed method of allocation of costs among grants in your cost allocation plan. Please submit that documentation of the full cost of each expense and also enclose a chart or similar document to show that you determined the portion of the cost to AmeriCorps and to these other grants. If you're billing for insurance, please submit proof of the policy amount, the type of insurance, and the date coverage. This might be the first page of the policy. An invoice is acceptable if it contains the same data. It must be clear how the charge to the grant ties to the total insurance expense. A chart showing how this is determined is very helpful. Occupancy costs such as space costs, utilities, and related expenses must be in your cost allocation plan. Submit documentation of the full cost of each expense. That could be your monthly rent payment or electricity bill. Also enclose a chart or similar document to show how you determined that portion of the cost that you're charging to this grant. If you have an equipment rental or lease you would like to charge to the grant, please submit a copy of that lease. It's only appropriate to charge the full amount of the cost to a single grant if the equipment is only used for that grant. If the full amount is charged to a single grant, you must include a statement to that effect. If charged to multiple grants, it must be clear how that charge to the grant is tied to the total equipment rental cost. If you have a vehicle lease, please submit a copy of the lease. And remember that it's only appropriate to charge the full amount of the cost to a single grant if the vehicle is only used for that grant. Mortgage interest is allowable under certain circumstances. This must have prior approval from Youth Build USA. Please reach out to us and we can work with you to figure out your best options. If you have full-time members, you will have to submit a member living allowance summary. In addition, please submit a copy of an official document that shows the gross living allowance paid, deductions, and net pay. If payroll is processed externally, this copy will most likely be a payroll register or equivalent from the payroll service provider. If payroll is processed internally, provide a copy of the check stub or other document, such as a payroll register printed from your accounting software, which presents this information. So no supporting documentation is required for member costs, such as FICA, unless the program has documentation from the IRS stating that the members are exempt from FICA. So we will need to see this documentation, that is workers' comp and health insurance. Indirect costs are pertinent only if the program is using an indirect rate for match to the AmeriCorps grant. You will have to submit a current indirect cost agreement negotiated with the cognizant agency of the federal government. If it has expired, please submit a statement as to when the program submitted the most recent proposal and that you're waiting for the agency to start complete negotiations with you, where applicable. I've mentioned a cost allocation plan throughout this presentation. And I really want to emphasize that all programs should have a cost allocation plan, which details how you determine the cost allocation amongst your various grants. You might be requested to submit a copy of your cost allocation plan to us. If you do not have a written cost allocation plan, then you might be asked to describe how costs are being allocated. Here is an example of a simple cost allocation plan. You'll notice that it clearly delineates between grants. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please reach out to your FM or PM. You can always consult our Help Docs website for detailed FAQs and federal policy information. And for more videos like this and other webinars, please visit our YouTube channel.